Hello there and welcome to another in the series of RIABU podcasts. It's a somber day here because we are daily entertaining news about the very sad events in Europe, in the Ukraine. We have RIABU, among other things, has a development team in Kiev, and we're profoundly concerned for their safety. We are in touch on a daily basis, and obviously we send them and all the people in the Ukraine our very best wishes. Now, today, given those events and given other pressures in the global economy, it's very likely that interest rates may go up. If interest rates go up, the balance sheet, if you borrow money, can become more expensive to fund, and therefore you might argue there's never been a better time to make sure that you maximize cash flow. And we wrote the book, Let the Cash Flow. That's my partner, Mark Lowdy, and myself, Simon Littlewood, to help companies of all sizes, but especially SMEs, to understand the 8 key principles that can help you get paid on time. If you have a solvent customer, that customer will be paying some of his suppliers. Make sure that you're one of them by following the 8 principles. And today, I have a very experienced and senior CFO guest in the studio with me, Teginder Singh. Teginder, a very warm welcome.
Thanks, Simon. Thanks for having me here.
Thank you very much for taking the time out of your day to visit us, and thank you for carefully reading the book, Let the Cash Flow. I'm delighted that you have read it, and indeed you've been kind enough to pass some fairly positive comments about it. Let's talk a little bit about what your role is in the industry that you work in.
So I am part of a big logistic e-commerce industry. We deal in last mile business, and I am the CFO for Southeast Asia region, covering Thailand, Malaysia, Vietnam, and Singapore region. Been into this role just recently, 3-4 years, and prior to this I was mostly handling, I have worked in almost all functions of finance, you can say FP&A and project finance and those sort. Yes, but now handling this role as a CFO.
And this role includes the management of accounts receivable?
Yes, this is the first time when I'm exposed to account receivable function, and probably I must say it's not an easy function to handle. It involves a lot of work and a lot of probably process development and all those things.
Okay, and tell us a little bit about the sort of problems that you experience with accounts receivable.
So there are all sort of issues, right? If I have to dissect the customer, or I have to divide the customer into different segments. So corporate customers have different issues, SMEs have different issues, and the long tail of customers have different issues in AR. If I have to say, okay, what are the common problems across all of them? So one big problem is the accuracy of invoicing, which I think you also covered in your.
So we're on to the virtuous revenue cycle.
Yeah.
So the third item is prompt and accurate invoicing.
Absolutely, yes. So that's I think the biggest problem. If you have an incorrect invoice to a customer, definitely you're not getting paid on time, because the time you're going to spend is only on the resolution of the issues or queries they would be raising to you.
We have a principle, Teginder, and it's based on many years of experience. What we say at RIABU is 80% of the time that you get paid late is because of something that you did wrong or should have done differently. And that's actually contrary to the perception of many companies who think it's the customer's fault. So sometimes you make mistakes or you miss stuff out, and that gives the customer an opportunity to pay you late. Yeah. So talk us through, because we have many people who watch this who are struggling with receivables, probably because we all do from time to time. No company always gets paid on time by every customer. What are some of the things that you encounter when it comes to accurate invoicing?
Yeah, so I think I would say, so if we have to talk about SMEs and those things, I think the first most important thing is to do it right first time. So as you mentioned, you can give it other name, prompt and accurate invoicing. It has to be right first time.
Yeah.
If you miss it, you give an opportunity to customer to debate or argue on those points, which probably will derail the whole discussion, and they will delay everything, on all the payments.
So you were sharing with me, it was very interesting, you were sharing with me that you have an onboarding process for customers, which involves finance, in which you make sure that they understand your views on prompt payment, and you understand their requirements in terms of an accurate invoice.
Absolutely, yeah. So as a part of the whole customer onboarding process, there are various stakeholders. So you have sales team, their part. You have a customer service team doing their part, and you have a finance team doing their part in terms of how they will invoice, when do they expect the payments, what is our credit policy, how do we handle those things. So finance is explaining to a customer when the customer get onboarded on all these processes.
Okay.
So there is definitely an engagement and when the customer is first interacting with the company. But again, still issues happen, right? Because customers are mostly interested in, I would say, the service part of the deal. Like how do I get services?
Yes.
But on the payment side, okay, let's talk later.
Do you ever think, I mean, yes, let's talk later. I mean, it's interesting, you know, Mark and I were talking about a customer recently, a very large customer, and it was evident that they wanted to avoid the whole question of what their invoicing requirements were, you know? Because if they can avoid it, then they can ensure that our first invoices don't actually meet their requirements, and we have to, over time, go through a process of discovery, which enables them to take their time to pay the. Now, what's interesting is that in business culture, they don't necessarily see themselves as being wrong. They think that's kind of an acceptable part of doing business, which is to maybe not be completely clear about what your requirements are. Does that ever happen to you?
Yeah, I think it's so not all customers might do it, or they will find an excuse of this process. But actually, if you talk about companies, SMEs even, they want to reconcile, they want to go deep dive into things too much these days. They want to reconcile each and every bit of thing which is coming to from a cost point of view. Every company is getting cost conscious, right? And everybody needs to hold on to cash. Just now when you mentioned about the Ukraine issue now, right? So definitely people will expect cash can be an issue if inflation rates goes higher and those things. So people will want to hold on to it. So it becomes an probable excuse or a space where they can probably hold on to cash for some time because we are debating on a certain topic. So it happens.
So don't let them hang on to the cash.
Yes.
And you do that by making sure that you understand precisely what their invoicing requirements are.
Yeah, I mean, so yes, we definitely understand. But if you look at any big corporate, they won't customize their invoices according to the customers, right? So they would have their own format, which is acceptable to a tax authority and legally and all those things. And then they might have requirements behind the invoice. Okay, you give me an invoice, but I need these details if you need a payment. So those things keep on adding up. With every new customer, you hear new things. Oh, I need this and that, which probably you have to deal with if you need to get paid on time.
Boy, do I understand this. Years ago, when I was a very young manager, I became the invoicing manager of a very, very large company in the UK. And the big sophisticated customers, like Tesco's, customers that had a lot of volume, were absolute experts of finding the tiniest thing wrong. An invoice might have 100 or 150 items on it. If there was a slight error with one of those items, the whole invoice would be stopped.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I mean, if you want to put a number to this, I think 20% of the issues are these in overall cycle of delayed payments. Because if there's a small amount being disputed, the whole invoice get halted. And
brilliant.
Yeah.
So we call that in the book. I know this is a tangent. We call it the lost revenue factor. In other words, if you add up the value of invoices that are held up due to issues that may be minor issues, that total value of invoices that are held up is the lost revenue factor, because you can't collect that money until those tiny issues are resolved. Yep. But there's another part to this, because we talk about prompt and accurate, and the prompt part is to do with revenue recognition. Now, you have quite a complex business where you're delivering a variety of goods across multiple markets, and you're depending very heavily on third parties to get those goods to the customer and to get, for example, an appropriate proof of delivery and so on and so forth. So tell me a bit about the challenges of revenue recognition, which is cutting an invoice at the earliest possible time.
Yeah, so I mean, when you are taking help from third parties to do your business, do you have their systems involved talking to your system? Then you have their teams involved who are part of your teams in a way, like outsourced vendors, you can say. So the issue becomes you can train your own team the way you want them to conduct business or the way you want to serve the customer, but it's very hard to impart the training beyond your teams, right? Third parties.
Yes.
And there the issue arises, right? I mean, so if it is to say, if they deliver a shipment, they need to press on a button, which probably helps you to invoice. And if they don't do it, they do it after 2 days, 3 days, or if they even don't do it, you might not invoice the customer on time.
Yes,
right? So
I mean, I think it's a fact of life, particularly here in Asia, where many companies, including substantial multinationals, are dependent on third parties to get their products to the market. If the third party doesn't precisely match your processes, then you have an issue. And I think this is something we maybe have to deal with in the second edition of our book, which is how you need to get distributors doing the things that you need to be done in order for you to get paid on time. So revenue recognition requires that your third party collects the information, gets the signature, and then gets that information back to you accurately and on time, and only then can you create an invoice.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
As a matter of interest, do you measure the gap between the first available opportunity to invoice and the amount of time that on the day that you actually invoice? So some people call it the lost revenue. So you have an agreement which says I can invoice you and these boxes have been ticked. Sometimes there's a delay.
No, so actually, if you look at the whole, when we speak about the cycle of delivery, right? It starts on day 1, and we anyways end on day 2 or day 3 max, even with third parties, because we are dealing only in last mile within the country, not cross border. So within these 3 days, this has to happen. So the earliest point, if my shipment is picked up today, has to be billed within 3 days. So if my system throws 5 days, but I can't see this
shipment getting billed. So you get a report which tells you this hasn't been billed.
This is not billed.
And then, I mean, 3 days is a lot when you look at your overall volume. 3 days.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
I don't know what 3 days of DSO is like because we haven't talked about your sales, but I'm guessing across your business as a whole, it's probably millions of dollars.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
That's very interesting. So, prompt revenue recognition, accurate invoice, and discussing the criteria that the customer, the things that the customer needs in order to make that invoice accurate. You said something very interesting earlier, Teginder, and I know we're going to talk about prompt discrepancy resolution because when these issues are identified, we need to deal with them. But one of the things you said that I thought was very interesting was you said unless you contact the customer early, then by the time you resolve the issue, the invoice is already paid late. We call that proactive contact. And it was interesting to me that you talked to it. Let's talk a little bit about contacting the customer early.
Yeah, I mean, so as I said earlier also, right, I mean, every customer is different. I mean, you have large corporates, and I mean, in our business, you have SMEs, you have Facebook, Instagram sellers. So there are different approach you need to take to handle all of these customers, right? So large corporate, definitely they don't want them to be chased like every now and then on the invoices. They will pay if they are satisfied with their invoicing and the other processes. But especially with the long tail of the customers, where you have small even Facebook, Instagram sellers, or very, very small shops, you need to be proactive with them. I mean, so you need to, in advance, maybe not just by after sending the invoice, I mean, before the invoice becomes due, you need to send them reminders if you need the payment on time.
In the book, we talk about, first of all, Pareto, because you can't do this for all of your customers. Top 20% of your customers account for 80% of your receivables. Contact them soon after they get the invoice to make sure there aren't any issues. And this is a challenge because it requires a process of education, because customers are used to being chased after they've already not paid, right?
Yeah.
But that process of, and in the book we provide some templates for how you can have that conversation so that the customer perceives it as a value-add service rather than as a premature request for payment.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to add to this point, so like if I am dealing with a big corporate, I don't have to ask for payment. In fact, I have to ask in a different way whether the invoice is okay.
Good.
Or you see any issues there, so that the customer confirms, and I know that this is not going to be a dispute when I'm going to ask for payment. So different approach. I mean, for a small customer, I may directly ask, okay, this is the due date, and I would expect a payment.
Well, a small customer, you have more leverage in a way, but a big customer. Good. I completely agree with that. Let's talk a little bit about prompt discrepancy resolution. So let's talk about how that works. So some of the time there's something wrong with the invoice or the customer thinks there's something wrong and he's not paying you.
So actually it might sound easy, but it's a very, very tedious process if you look into logistic business. So just to give you an example, the customer is debating on a shipment and he said the shipment was damaged. Now my system would not know it's damaged because I need to speak to the courier who has delivered the shipment. So the process, I mean, the finance team needs to speak to the ops head, who then speak to the ops manager, and then the courier. So it takes a lot of time, and the guy or the courier on the ground is already busy with his own daily activities. So for him, this is not a priority activity. So it takes a hell amount of time in order to come to a solution and come to probably the final solution where he accepts it or he gives answer the issue was not this or something else, and then you go back to customer and we debate. So it's a very lengthy process.
So one of the things that we say in the book, because I absolutely recognise this, in any organisation of any size, the finance department's trying to get the money, but there's lots of other people that are involved. So in this case, the distributor, the operations guy, but it could be the sales guy who's made a mistake on the pricing. It could be a product quality issue. It could be a whole range of things, right? Not only do you need to identify that issue ahead of time, but you need to have a very effective and prompt exchange of information with other functions, some of which may not be functions within your organization. And one of the things that we argue is, if you're trying to do this, it sounds like you're already doing it, but if you're not doing it, you need to figure out what the main potential errors are, and you need to define who has to resolve them and how long they should have. So we argue for an internal service level agreement, because you said it yourself, they've got day-to-day things to do. You know,
Absolutely.
Dealing with receivables issues from 2 months ago is very unlikely to be at the top of their agenda.
Absolutely, and probably everybody is working in the company for an IQ, right? So everybody has their own IQ. You might work for your own department, and then these issues are also important, but again, it depends how much time they can devote to it, because they need to complete the main task first and then focus on these.
We talk about balanced scorecard as well among the 8 things, simply because if everyone is not pulling in the same, everyone needs to have a responsibility for cash flow. It doesn't have to be their primary responsibility, but it's no good if you're sitting in finance and these issues and these invoices are not being paid because of things that other people need to do or to correct. If they don't help you, you really can't collect that money. So that level of cooperation is really important. It needs to be defined. That brings us to the other issue. We're getting through the eight elements of the virtuous revenue cycle very effectively, and that's what we call, you know, top-down ownership and also, you know, good level of sales engagement. So, what's your experience? Do you always get the support of senior management when it comes to facing down customers who want to pay you late? You said you were fairly fortunate in your company.
Yeah, so we were very, very fortunate. In that sense, all the C-suite executives, they are into the problem always. They will in fact speak to the customer why it's being delayed, and they are probably holding on to the credit policies of the company.
I think you're quite fortunate. I mean, you know, I talk to many companies, and quite often the finance guy feels rather lonely because the organization is sales-led and their objective is to maximize the revenue, and often other people other than finance feel that having a frank conversation with the customer about prompt payment may not be the best way to get the next deal, right?
Yep. No, if you don't collect it, it's going to hit the P&L someday,
well,
right?
it's not a deal anyway, is it? I mean, that's my first boss said this to me years ago. He said, if you're not paid, you don't have a sale, right?
Yes, absolutely.
You're a charity.
Yes.
So that's really good. Teginder, this has been absolutely fascinating. I'm delighted that you were able to spare time to come here with us today. Is there anything else, because you clearly have got this subject pretty much nailed, is there anything else that you would say to another CFO struggling with receivables issues? Is there any other advice that you would give them? Yeah.
So I think probably I will stick to the similar points what you have. So getting it right first time. I mean, it's very important that you do accurate invoicing first time, because if you miss it, you are inviting problems for your collection later on, which is going to take more time, and quality-wise, customer is going to be dissatisfied. So if you want a happy customer, you need to get it right first time in terms of invoicing and being proactive. I mean, if you just keep in mind these 2 things, it will solve 80 to 90% of your issues in a year. That's it.
I'm going to offer you a job selling our book, Teg, because I agree with absolutely everything
I think this is going to be a big hit, so definitely I will take it. Give me a cut.
Okay. Teginder Singh, thank you very much for coming here today. Getting paid on time has never been more important than now. With world events the way they are, it's quite likely that cash will become tougher and interest rates will go up. Do think about taking a look at Let the Cash Flow, or come to the RIABU website and find the tools that we can provide you with to help get paid on time. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Thanks, Simon, for having me.